Yo, real talk, you ever felt so empty inside that even getting exactly what you wanted doesn't fill that void? Like you've been chasing this one thing your whole life thinking once I get this I'll finally be good, but then you get it and nothing? Just more emptiness? That's Sasuke Uchiha in a nutshell, dude. And honestly, that's low-key all of us at some point. See, Sasuke's story isn't just about some anime character going rogue and hunting down his brother. Nah, it's way deeper than that. It's about what happens when you build your entire identity around revenge, when you use anger as a shield against loneliness, when you push away everyone who actually cares about you because you're terrified of losing them like you lost your family. The psychological breakdown we're about to dive into is insane, and if you've ever felt isolated, misunderstood, or like you had to handle everything solo because trusting people felt too risky, bro, you're gonna see yourself in this. Sasuke's journey is basically a masterclass in attachment trauma, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why some wounds run so deep that even victory tastes like defeat. Alright, before we go deeper into Sasuke's psychological spiral, do me a solid real quick, smash that subscribe button and drop a like on this video. What? Because if you're vibing with this deep dive into anime psychology, there's a whole ton more where this came from. We break down characters like therapists over here, no cap. Plus, if you don't subscribe, you're gonna miss the next analysis that might literally explain why you do the things you do. Sasuke's story is just the beginning, fam. Let's keep this journey going together. Hit that button and let's build this community of people who actually think about what's going on beneath the surface. Alright, let's get into the psychology behind Sasuke because this is where things get real heavy. To understand why Sasuke became who he is, we gotta go back to that night, the night Itachi massacred the entire Uchiha clan. Picture this. You're a little kid, maybe 7 years old, you come home expecting dinner with your fam, and instead you find everyone you've ever known dead. Your mom, your dad, your cousins, your neighbors, everyone. And the person who did it? Your older brother, the one you looked up to more than anyone in the world. The one you wanted to be like. That's not just trauma, dude. That's a complete psychological annihilation of everything you thought was safe and true. Now here's where the psychology gets wild. What Itachi did wasn't just murder. He trapped Sasuke in a genjutsu and made him watch the massacre over and over and over again for 72 hours straight. In Sasuke's mind, he experienced his family being killed thousands of times. From a psychological standpoint, this is what we call complex trauma or developmental trauma. It's not just one bad thing that happened. It's a trauma so severe and so repetitive that it literally rewires how your brain processes safety, trust, and relationships. Sasuke's brain basically got programmed to believe that attachment equals pain, that love equals loss, and that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. This is where the concept of attachment theory comes in, and it's super important to understand this. Psychologist John Bowlby talked about how our early relationships shape how we connect with people for the rest of our lives. When you grow up with secure attachments, like your parents are there for you, they're consistent, they make you feel safe, you develop what's called a secure attachment style. You trust people, you can be vulnerable, you can form healthy relationships. But when your attachment figures betray you, abandon you, or in Sasuke's case, literally murder everyone you love, you develop what's called an avoidant attachment style or even a disorganized attachment style. Sasuke's whole personality after the massacre screams avoidant attachment. He pushes people away, he refuses to show vulnerability, he acts like he doesn't need anyone, and he convinces himself that emotional connections are weaknesses. But here's the thing that's so tragic about this. Deep down, Sasuke is absolutely starving for connection. He wants it so badly, but he's terrified of it at the same time because every time he's loved someone, they've either died or betrayed him. So what does he do? He creates this armor made of rage and revenge. He tells himself that his only purpose is to kill Itachi, because having a mission is easier than dealing with the crushing loneliness and grief that's actually eating him alive from the inside. Let's talk about Team 7 for a second, because this is where you really see Sasuke's internal conflict play out. When he first gets put on a team with Naruto and Sakura under Kakashi's leadership, Sasuke's walls are sky high. He doesn't want friends, he doesn't want bonds, he just wants to get stronger so he can kill his brother. But slowly, almost against his will, he starts to care about them. There's this beautiful moment where he almost dies protecting Naruto during the fight with Haku, and he says something like, "My body just moved on its own." That's his subconscious need for connection breaking through the armor. His body knew what his mind couldn't accept. That he actually cared about these people, that they were becoming important to him, that he was forming new attachments. But here's where the psychology gets even more interesting. The moment Sasuke starts feeling connected to Team 7, he freaks out. What? Because in his mind, caring about people means setting yourself up to lose them. It means giving them the power to hurt you. So when Itachi shows up again and completely destroys Sasuke in battle, essentially showing him that he's still weak despite all his training, Sasuke spirals hard. He realizes that he's been wasting time forming bonds when he should have been solely focused on getting stronger. This is a defense mechanism called splitting or black and white thinking. Sasuke can't hold two truths at the same time. He can't believe that he can both love his friends and pursue his revenge. In his traumatized mind, it has to be one or the other. This is also where we see something called survivor's guilt kick in hardcore. Sasuke wasn't just traumatized by what happened. He feels guilty that he survived when everyone else died. There's this unspoken belief in his mind that he doesn't deserve happiness, that he doesn't deserve connection, because his clan is gone and he's still here. The only way he can justify his existence is by dedicating his entire life to avenging them. If he's not pursuing revenge, then what's the point of him being alive? This type of thinking is super common in trauma survivors, especially those who've lost people in violent or sudden ways. They feel like they owe it to the dead to suffer, to not move on, to keep the pain alive as a way of honoring those they lost. Now let's talk about the relationship between Sasuke and Naruto, because this is psychological gold. Naruto represents everything Sasuke both wants and fears. Naruto also grew up alone, also had no family, also dealt with rejection and isolation. But Naruto chose connection over isolation, chose hope over despair, chose to keep reaching out to people even when they pushed him away. Naruto is basically who Sasuke could have become if he'd processed his trauma differently. And that drives Sasuke absolutely crazy, because deep down, he knows Naruto's way might actually lead to real healing, but he's too scared to try it. It's easier to stay in the pain you know than to risk the vulnerability of actually letting people in and possibly losing them again. There's this concept in psychology called repetition compulsion, where trauma survivors unconsciously recreate the conditions of their trauma over and over again. Sasuke does this constantly. He keeps pushing people away, keeps isolating himself, keeps choosing situations where he'll end up alone, because that's what he knows, that's what feels familiar, even though it's killing him. His revenge quest isn't really about Itachi at all, it's about avoiding the terrifying work of actually healing from what happened, of actually grieving his family, of actually letting himself feel the full weight of that loss instead of channeling it all into rage. The saddest part? Sasuke actually had people who genuinely cared about him. Kakashi tried to guide him, Sakura loved him unconditionally, and Naruto refused to give up on him no matter what. But Sasuke couldn't accept that love because his trauma told him that love equals pain, that attachment equals loss, that the only safe emotional state is numbness and isolation. So he ran. He left the village, he went to Orochimaru, he chose power over connection. Because in his mind, power was the only thing that could protect him from ever feeling that helpless and devastated again. So Sasuke leaves the village and goes to Orochimaru, thinking he's finally on the right path to get the power he needs. But here's what's really happening psychologically: he's entering what we call a dissociative state. Dissociation is when you disconnect from your emotions, your body, or your sense of self as a way to cope with overwhelming pain. Sasuke isn't just training with Orochimaru, he's essentially trying to kill off the part of himself that still feels, that still cares, that still remembers what it was like to laugh with Team 7. He's attempting to become a pure instrument of revenge, with no emotions to hold him back. But here's the thing about emotions, bro: you can suppress them, you can ignore them, you can shove them down deep, but they don't actually go away. They just build up pressure until they explode. And that explosion happens when Sasuke finally gets what he's wanted his entire life. He faces Itachi and Itachi dies. But here's the kicker that completely shatters Sasuke's entire worldview: Itachi wasn't the villain. Itachi was ordered by the village elders to massacre the Uchiha clan to prevent a coup. Itachi killed his own family, carried the weight of being seen as a traitor and a murderer, and lived in exile, all to protect the village and specifically to protect Sasuke. Every single thing Sasuke believed about that night was wrong. The brother he hated actually loved him more than anything. The revenge that gave his life meaning was based on a lie. The pain he'd been carrying, the isolation he chose, the bonds he destroyed, all of it was for nothing. This is what psychologists call a meaning crisis, or an existential collapse. Sasuke's entire identity was built on this foundation of revenge. When that foundation crumbles, he doesn't know who he is anymore. Think about it: if you spend 10 years of your life working toward one goal, sacrificing everything for it, pushing away everyone who cares about you for it, and then you achieve it only to discover it was all based on a misunderstanding, what do you have left? Who are you if you're not the Avenger? What's your purpose if revenge is no longer the answer? This is one of the most devastating psychological experiences a person can have. the complete dissolution of their sense of identity and purpose. Now, a healthy person might process this information, grieve properly, and start to rebuild their life with a new understanding. But Sasuke? Nah man. He's so deep in his trauma, so unable to process emotions in a healthy way, that he does what a lot of traumatized people do. He redirects his rage. If Itachi isn't the enemy, then the village that ordered the massacre is the enemy. If his family was destroyed to protect the village, then the village needs to be destroyed. See how that works? Sasuke can't let go of the anger because the anger is the only thing keeping him from feeling the actual grief, the actual loss, the actual loneliness that's been festering inside him since he was 7 years old. The anger is a shield, and if he drops it, he'll have to face the unbearable pain underneath. This is textbook what's called complicated grief, or traumatic grief. Normal grief has stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. You move through them, you feel them, and eventually you integrate the loss into your life and move forward. But traumatic grief gets stuck. The person can't move through the stages because the loss is too overwhelming, too sudden, too violent. So they get trapped in one stage, usually anger or denial, and they can't get out. Sasuke has been stuck in the anger stage for over a decade. He's used revenge as a way to avoid actually grieving his family, and now that revenge is gone, he has to find a new target for that anger or he'll drown in the sadness underneath. Let's also talk about the psychological concept of splitting again, because Sasuke does this in an extreme way. Splitting is when you see things in absolute black and white, all good or all bad with no gray area. First, Itachi was all bad and the village was good. Now the village is all bad and Itachi was a tragic hero. Sasuke can't hold the nuance that maybe Itachi made a terrible choice, that maybe the village leaders were wrong but not everyone in the village is evil, that maybe the situation was complicated and messy like real life always is. Nah, he needs a clear enemy, a clear villain, because that's simpler than dealing with the complex reality that sometimes good people do terrible things, sometimes systems are broken, and sometimes there's no one person to blame for all the pain you're feeling. Here's where it gets really dark psychologically. Sasuke starts talking about destroying the village and severing all bonds. He's not just talking about revenge anymore, he's talking about complete isolation, about cutting himself off from any possibility of human connection. This is suicidal ideation dressed up as a mission. When someone says they want to sever all bonds, what they're really saying is, I'm in so much pain that I can't handle any emotional connection because connection requires vulnerability and vulnerability leads to pain. Sasuke would rather destroy everything and be completely alone than risk caring about someone and losing them again. That's not strength, bro, that's someone who's drowning and doesn't know how to ask for help. And here's the most heartbreaking part, Naruto keeps showing up. No matter how many times Sasuke pushes him away, no matter how many times Sasuke tries to kill him, Naruto refuses to give up on him. From a psychological perspective, Naruto is offering Sasuke exactly what he needs: unconditional positive regard, consistent attachment, proof that someone will stay even when things get ugly. But Sasuke can't accept it because his trauma has convinced him that this kind of love doesn't exist, or if it does exist, it won't last. He's waiting for Naruto to abandon him, to betray him, to prove that his cynical worldview is correct. And when Naruto doesn't do that, when Naruto just keeps coming back, it actually makes Sasuke more angry because it challenges everything he believes about relationships and trust. There's a concept in therapy called corrective emotional experience. It's when someone has a new experience that contradicts their trauma-based beliefs and helps them heal. Naruto is trying to give Sasuke a corrective emotional experience, trying to show him that not everyone leaves, that some bonds are strong enough to survive conflict, that he's worthy of being fought for. But here's the thing about trauma, it makes you resist exactly what you need. Sasuke needs connection, but his trauma makes him push it away. He needs vulnerability, but his trauma tells him vulnerability is dangerous. He needs to grieve, but his trauma has taught him that feeling the full weight of his pain will literally destroy him. Let's talk about the Valley of the End fight because this is where Sasuke's internal collapse is on full display. He's not just fighting Naruto, he's fighting against the part of himself that wants to go back, that wants to accept help, that wants to stop running. Every punch, every jutsu, every word is Sasuke trying to kill off his own capacity for connection. He even says he wants to kill Naruto because Naruto is his closest bond, and he thinks that by severing that bond he'll finally be free from pain. But that's not how it works psychologically. Cutting off your emotions doesn't free you, it just makes you empty. Pushing away everyone who cares about you doesn't make you strong, it just makes you alone. What Sasuke doesn't understand, what his trauma won't let him see, is that the pain he's trying to avoid by isolating himself is already inside him. You can't run from internal pain by changing external circumstances. You can't heal attachment wounds by refusing to attach to anyone. You can't process grief by staying busy with revenge. All you can do is delay the inevitable moment when you'll have to actually feel everything you've been avoiding. And the longer you delay it, the worse it gets, because you're not just carrying the original trauma anymore, you're also carrying all the guilt and shame and regret from the things you did while trying to avoid the trauma. Sasuke's at war with himself, and it's the saddest kind of war because both sides lose. The part of him that wants connection loses because he keeps pushing people away. The part of him that wants isolation loses because you can't ever truly isolate yourself from your own heart. He's trapped in this psychological prison where he can't move forward and he can't go back, and the only thing he knows how to do is keep fighting, keep running, keep pretending that if he just gets strong enough or distant enough, he'll finally stop hurting. But strength doesn't heal trauma, bro, distance doesn't cure loneliness. And revenge definitely doesn't bring back the people you lost. The really messed up part is that Sasuke knows on some level that what he's doing isn't working. There are moments where you can see it in his eyes. The doubt, the exhaustion, the quiet desperation of someone who's been running for so long they forgot what they're running toward. But admitting that would mean admitting that he wasted years of his life, that he hurt people who loved him for nothing, that he chose the wrong path. And that realization is so painful that he'd rather keep going down the wrong path than face the truth. This is called the sunk cost fallacy in psychology, when you've invested so much in something that you keep investing more even when you know it's not working, because admitting it was all for nothing feels worse than continuing to suffer. Yo, hold up real quick, what are you thinking so far? Like, seriously, drop a comment down below because I want to know if this is hitting home for you. Have you ever felt like Sasuke? Like you had to handle everything alone because trusting people felt too risky? Or maybe you know someone who's been stuck in that cycle of pushing everyone away even though they're hurting inside. Your story matters, fam, share it in the comments. Let's build a community where we can actually talk about this stuff without judgment. Plus, your comments literally help me keep making content like this, so it's a win-win. And hey, stick around till the end because we're about to get into the moment where everything changes for Sasuke. The point of no return that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew about his character. Trust me, you don't want to miss this next part. Alright, so we've talked about Sasuke's trauma, his attachment issues, his identity crisis, but now we gotta talk about the moment that changes everything. The Fourth Great Ninja War. This is where Sasuke hits what psychologists call the point of no return. That moment in someone's psychological journey where they either break through to healing or they break down completely. And for Sasuke, it's both at the same time. Here's what happens. Sasuke gets all the information, he talks to the previous Hokages, he learns the full history of the village, and he has to make a choice about what he's gonna do with all this knowledge. And this is huge from a psychological standpoint because this is the first time since the massacre that Sasuke is actually making a choice that isn't purely driven by reactive trauma. Up until this point, everything he's done has been a reaction. Reacting to Itachi's betrayal, reacting to the truth about Itachi, reacting to his pain by lashing out. But now he has to actually decide who he wants to be and what kind of world he wants to create. And here's where it gets wild. Sasuke decides he's gonna become Hokage, but not in the way Naruto wants to. Sasuke's plan is to become a dictator, to take all the hatred of the world onto himself, to be the villain that unites everyone else in opposition to him. He literally wants to become the sacrificial darkness so the world can have light. Now on the surface this might sound noble or whatever, but psychologically, this is what we call a martyrdom complex, or savior complex, mixed with some serious self-destructive ideation. Sasuke still doesn't believe he deserves love, connection, or happiness, so he's creating a life purpose that guarantees he'll be alone, hated, and miserable forever. Think about what he's really saying here. I'll carry all the pain so nobody else has to. That's not a healthy mission, bro. That's someone who's so used to suffering that they can't imagine a life without it. That's someone who's so convinced they're fundamentally damaged that they think the best they can offer the world is to remove themselves from it emotionally while still existing physically. It's like psychological suicide without the actual death. He's trying to erase himself as a person while still fulfilling what he sees as his duty. This is textbook trauma response. The belief that your pain has to serve a purpose, that your suffering needs to mean something because if it doesn't, then it was all for nothing. But here's where Naruto comes in again, and this time it's different. Naruto doesn't just tell Sasuke he's wrong, he shows him that he understands. During their final fight at the Valley of the End, Naruto basically says, I get it. I understand your pain. I felt that loneliness too. But isolating yourself isn't the answer. And this is crucial psychologically because what Sasuke needs more than anything is validation. He needs someone to acknowledge that his pain is real, that his trauma makes sense, that his feelings are legitimate, before he can even begin to consider a different path. This is a fundamental principle in trauma therapy called validation before challenge. You can't tell someone to change their coping mechanisms until you first validate why they developed those mechanisms in the first place. Naruto gets this instinctively. He's not telling Sasuke, just get over it, or stop being so dramatic. He's saying, I see you, I understand why you're like this, and I'm still here. That kind of unconditional acceptance is exactly what Sasuke's attachment-wounded heart has been starving for, even though he's been fighting against it the whole time. The fight between them isn't really about jutsu or power levels. It's about two different philosophies of dealing with pain. Naruto represents the path of connection, of sharing burdens, of believing that people are stronger together. Sasuke represents the path of isolation, of carrying everything alone, of believing that caring about people only leads to pain. And they literally beat the hell out of each other until they can't move anymore, until they're both lying there bleeding and exhausted. And in that moment of complete vulnerability, something finally breaks through Sasuke's armor. Here's the psychological breakthrough. Sasuke finally admits he's lonely. He finally says out loud what he's been running from for over a decade, that he's been desperately, achingly, unbearably lonely this entire time. That all the revenge, all the power, all the grand plans about saving the world through becoming its enemy, it was all just an elaborate defense mechanism to avoid admitting that he's a scared, hurt kid who lost his family and doesn't know how to trust anyone ever again. This is what psychologists call emotional breakthrough. When someone finally lets themselves feel and express the emotion they've been repressing, and it's usually the moment when real healing can begin. And Naruto's response? He just says, I know. Not, I told you so, not, finally you admit it, just, I know. That's acceptance. That's unconditional positive regard. That's the corrective emotional experience we talked about earlier. Naruto is proving to Sasuke that vulnerability doesn't lead to rejection or abandonment, it leads to deeper connection. That admitting weakness doesn't make you a target, it makes you human. That needing people isn't a flaw, it's literally how we're wired as social creatures. Now here's where the psychology gets really interesting. Sasuke cries. For the first time since the massacre, Sasuke actually lets himself cry. And crying is huge psychologically because it's a physical release of emotional pain. When you cry, your body is literally processing and releasing stress hormones. People who never cry often have higher levels of chronic stress and anxiety because they're not allowing their body to complete that emotional cycle. Sasuke has been holding in over a decade of grief, rage, fear, and loneliness, and finally he let some of it out. But here's the thing about trauma recovery, it's not a one-time fix. Sasuke doesn't suddenly become a different person after this moment. He still has years of maladaptive coping patterns to unlearn. He still has a warped sense of self-worth. He still struggles with accepting love and connection. The difference is that now he's willing to try. Now he acknowledges that his way wasn't working, and maybe, just maybe, there's another path forward. Sasuke's journey after the war is what real trauma recovery looks like. Messy, inconsistent, full of setbacks and doubts. He leaves the village again, but this time it's not to run away, it's to figure out who he is outside of his trauma. This is actually a healthy choice psychologically. Sometimes you need space and solitude to do the internal work of healing, as long as you're not using that solitude to avoid connection entirely. Sasuke is finally starting to differentiate between, I need time alone to process, and, I'm isolating myself because I'm afraid. There's this concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. The idea that sometimes people who go through terrible trauma can eventually develop greater strength, wisdom, and appreciation for life than they had before. But this only happens if you actually process the trauma instead of avoiding it. Sasuke is finally starting that process. He's finally asking himself the hard questions. Who am I without revenge? What do I actually want from life? Can I trust people again? Is it possible to honor my family's memory without destroying myself in the process? And the answer to that last question is yes, but it requires something Sasuke has been terrified of his entire post-massacre life. It requires letting people in. It requires accepting that you can't control everything, that loving people means risking loss, that vulnerability is scary, but it's also the only path to genuine connection and healing. Sasuke is finally starting to understand that strength isn't about being invulnerable, it's about being brave enough to be vulnerable anyway. When Sasuke eventually returns to the village and starts trying to rebuild his relationships, especially with Sakura, and eventually having a family of his own, it's not because he's fixed, it's because he's finally willing to do the work. He's willing to show up imperfectly, to admit when he's struggling, to ask for help when he needs it. And that's actual growth, bro. That's what courage really looks like, not being fearless but being scared and doing it anyway. The relationship between Sasuke and his daughter Sarada and Boruto is actually a beautiful example of intergenerational trauma and the attempt to break that cycle. Sasuke is absent a lot, and you can see he's still struggling with how to be emotionally present and vulnerable. But the difference is he's trying. He's not running away from having a family because he's scared of losing them. He's engaging with that fear and choosing connection anyway. He's learning that you can carry your trauma and still build a life worth living. That the scars don't have to define you, even though they'll always be part of your story. This is the ultimate psychological truth that Sasuke's journey teaches us. You can't heal trauma by avoiding it, by numbing yourself to it, or by channeling it into revenge or anger or isolation. You heal trauma by feeling it, by letting safe people support you through it, by slowly learning to trust again even when every instinct tells you trust is dangerous. It's not a quick process, it's not a linear process, and it's definitely not easy, but it's the only way forward that doesn't lead to more suffering. So here's the real question that Sasuke's story leaves us with, and it's honestly the most uncomfortable one. Can you ever truly heal from trauma that deep? Like, can someone who experienced what Sasuke experienced ever be normal again? And the psychological answer is complicated, because healing doesn't mean going back to who you were before the trauma. It means integrating the trauma into who you are now and learning to live a meaningful life despite it. Sasuke will never be the carefree kid he was before the massacre. That version of him died the night his clan did. But he can become someone new, someone who carries those scars but isn't controlled by them anymore. Here's what's real though, even years later, even after choosing connection over isolation, even after having a family and finding his place in the world again, Sasuke still struggles. You can see it in his eyes, in the way he holds himself apart, in how he still defaults to handling things alone. The psychological term for this is trauma residue. Even after you've done the healing work, there are still patterns, still triggers, still moments where your brain defaults back to those old protective mechanisms. And that's okay. That's not failure. That's just being human. What makes Sasuke's story so powerful psychologically is that it doesn't give us a neat, clean ending where everything's perfect. Real trauma recovery doesn't work that way. You don't just have one breakthrough moment and then you're healed forever. It's more like, you have a breakthrough and then you do the work and then you have another setback and then you learn from that setback and then you make progress again, and it's this constant cycle of growth and struggle and growth again. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes 1 step forward, 3 steps back. But as long as you keep choosing connection, keep choosing vulnerability, keep choosing to feel instead of numbing out, you're moving in the right direction. Let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough. The people around Sasuke who held space for his healing. Naruto, Sakura, Kakashi, even Sasuke's daughter Sarada. They all played crucial roles in his recovery by refusing to give up on him even when he gave up on himself. This is what psychologists call social support, and it's literally one of the most important factors in trauma recovery. You cannot heal in isolation. You need people who will see you at your worst and still choose to stay. People who will call you out when you're self-destructing but do it from a place of love, not judgment. People who will be patient with your process even when it's messy and non-linear. But here's the thing that's low-key tragic. Sasuke put those people through hell. His trauma doesn't excuse the pain he caused others. Sakura waited years for him, loving someone who kept pushing her away. Naruto almost destroyed himself trying to save Sasuke. The village had to deal with his betrayal and his attacks. And this is a real psychological complexity that we need to talk about. Trauma explains behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. Sasuke is responsible for his choices, even the ones he made while drowning in unprocessed grief and pain. Part of his healing journey has to include taking accountability for the hurt he caused, making amends where possible, and living with the guilt of knowing he damaged people who didn't deserve it. This is something a lot of people struggle with when they start healing from trauma. The guilt and shame that comes with recognizing how your pain led you to hurt others. It's tempting to either minimize it like, I was hurting so it's fine, or to spiral into self-hatred like, I'm a terrible person and I don't deserve forgiveness. The healthy middle ground is acknowledging both truths. Yes, you were hurting and doing the best you could with the tools you had at the time, and yes, your actions had real consequences for real people, and you need to take responsibility for that. Sasuke has to live with that duality, and honestly, that's one of the hardest parts of recovery. Now let's get real about something that hits different when you really think about it. Sasuke's story is a lot of our stories, just in anime form. Maybe you didn't have your clan massacred, but maybe you had a parent abandon you, or someone you trusted betrayed you deeply, or you lost someone suddenly and violently. Maybe you've built walls so high that nobody can get in because you're terrified of being hurt again. Maybe you've pushed away good people because you didn't believe you deserved their love. Maybe you've been so focused on being strong and independent that you forgot how to ask for help. If any of that resonates, you're living some version of Sasuke's psychological journey. And here's what his story is really telling us. That version of strength where you handle everything alone, where you never show weakness, where you turn your pain into anger and your fear into isolation. That's not actually strength. That's survival mode. That's your nervous system stuck in threat response. Real strength is being able to say, I'm struggling and I need support. Real strength is choosing to trust again even though you've been hurt before. Real strength is feeling your feelings instead of numbing them, being vulnerable instead of building walls, asking for connection instead of pushing it away. The psychological concept here is called interdependence. The understanding that humans are fundamentally social creatures who need each other to thrive. Not codependence where you can't function without others, and not independence where you refuse all help. But interdependence, where you're a whole person who also recognizes that we're all in this together and it's okay to lean on each other. Sasuke's entire arc is learning to move from traumatized independence to healthy interdependence. And that's the journey a lot of us need to make too. But here's the uncomfortable truth that Sasuke's story also reveals. Some people don't make it to the other side. Some people stay stuck in their trauma forever. Some people push away everyone who tries to help until there's nobody left. Some people choose revenge or bitterness or isolation, and they die alone and miserable, never having healed from what hurt them. Sasuke almost became one of those people. He was literally one choice away from a completely different ending where he dies alone, having destroyed everyone who loved him, having accomplished nothing but spreading more pain into the world. What saved him? Naruto's refusal to give up, yes, but also, and this is crucial, Sasuke's own tiny flickering willingness to be saved. Even when he was at his worst, there was some small part of him that wanted connection, that wanted to be understood, that wanted to stop hurting. And that small part was enough for healing to have something to work with. This is important for anyone dealing with trauma. You don't need to want recovery 100%. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need that tiny spark of willingness, that small voice saying, maybe there's another way, and that's enough to start with. Let's talk about legacy for a second because this is where Sasuke's story gets really deep. The Uchiha clan was destroyed, and Sasuke is one of the last remaining members. For a long time, he thought honoring his clan meant avenging them through violence. But what he eventually learns is that the real way to honor them is to live well, to build something new, to not let the tragedy define him forever. When he has Sarada, when he starts passing down his knowledge and skills to the next generation, that's him choosing life over death, hope over despair, creation over destruction. That's him saying, what happened to my clan was terrible, but I'm not gonna let that tragedy be the end of the story. This is what psychologists call meaning-making, the process of taking your trauma and finding some way to integrate it into a larger narrative that includes purpose, growth, and hope. It doesn't mean the trauma was worth it or happened for a reason. That's toxic positivity and it's not helpful. It means that despite the trauma, despite how unfair and terrible it was, you're going to find a way to build a life that has meaning and value. You're going to take the worst thing that ever happened to you and make sure it doesn't have the final word on who you become. But, and this is a big but, the scars never fully disappear. Sasuke still has the Sharingan, the physical manifestation of his clan's trauma literally embedded in his eyes. He can't ever fully escape his history and honestly he shouldn't have to. The goal isn't to forget or to pretend it didn't happen. The goal is to carry it differently. To let it be part of your story without letting it be your entire story. To acknowledge that yeah, terrible things happened and they changed you forever and you still get to choose what you do next. Here's something that's gonna hit hard. Sasuke's relationship with his daughter Sarada shows us both how far he's come and how far he still has to go. He loves her, you can tell he loves her deeply, but he still struggles with being emotionally present. He still leaves for long missions, still keeps his distance, still finds it hard to express affection openly. And Sarada struggles with this, wondering if her father cares about her, dealing with her own abandonment feelings. This is intergenerational trauma playing out in real time. Sasuke is doing better than the complete emotional shutdown he was stuck in for years, but he's still carrying patterns from his own traumatic childhood that affect how he parents. And isn't that real life though? You do the work, you heal a lot, you make progress, and you still mess up sometimes. You still fall back into old patterns under stress. You still hurt people you love even though you're trying your best not to. Recovery isn't perfection. Recovery is awareness, effort, and willingness to repair when you mess up. Sasuke isn't a perfect father, but he's trying and he's willing to acknowledge when he's falling short, and that's what matters. The last thing I want to say about Sasuke's psychological journey is this. His story matters because it shows us that redemption is possible, but it's not easy or automatic. You don't just say, "I'm sorry," and everything's fixed. You have to do the work. You have to face what you've done, feel the appropriate guilt and remorse, make amends where possible, and then live differently going forward. You have to prove through consistent action over time that you've actually changed. And even then, some people might never forgive you, and you have to accept that too. Sasuke has to live with the knowledge that some people in the village will never fully trust him again, and that's a consequence of his choices that he has to carry. So what's the takeaway from all this? What's the psychological lesson that Sasuke's entire journey is teaching us? Is this: trauma will try to convince you that isolation is safety, that walls are protection, that never trusting anyone again is the smart choice. But that's the trauma talking, not the truth. The truth is that healing happens in connection. The truth is that vulnerability, while scary, is the only path to genuine intimacy and belonging. The truth is that you are worthy of love and support even at your messiest, most broken moments. Maybe especially then. If you're watching this and you see yourself in Sasuke's story, if you've been hurt deeply and you've built walls to protect yourself, if you push people away because you're scared of losing them, if you've been carrying pain alone because asking for help feels impossible, I want you to hear this. You don't have to stay stuck there. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be scary. You're going to have setbacks. But on the other side of that vulnerability, that trust, that willingness to let people in despite the risk, that's where real life is. That's where healing is. That's where you get to be fully yourself, scars and all, and be loved anyway. Yo, but here's the thing. Sasuke's story doesn't end here, and neither should yours. If this video hit you in the feels, if you're sitting there thinking about your own walls and your own pain and your own journey toward healing, then you need to check out our next video. We're diving deep into Naruto psychology next, the flip side of this coin. We're talking about how Naruto dealt with abandonment, loneliness, and rejection by choosing connection instead of isolation, and the psychological cost of always being the one who saves everyone else while never letting anyone save you. Listen, if Sasuke's story resonated with you, Naruto's is gonna complete the picture. You're gonna understand why these two characters are literally two sides of the same trauma coin, and you're gonna learn some real psychological tools for dealing with your own pain in healthier ways. Plus, we're building a community here of people who actually think deeply about this stuff, who aren't afraid to look at the hard psychological truths, who want to understand themselves and others better. Don't just watch and bounce, stick around, become part of this journey. Click that next video right now. Don't wait. Don't scroll away. Your healing matters, your story matters, and understanding the psychology behind these characters might just give you the insight you need to start your own breakthrough. Let's keep going together, fam. The story doesn't end here. Not for Sasuke, not for Naruto, and definitely not for you. See you in the next one.